hand if you hear my voice. Thank you. Wonderful. All right, let's keep the momentum going. So, my name is Lena Schlachmuijlder. I'm the Senior Vice President of Programs at Search for Common Ground and have been doing peace-building work for decades. And for the last few years, I've been also championing this idea of digital peace-building. What does it look like when we use digital tools? How can we navigate the harm that we see online? And yesterday we heard several of the speakers talk about how the polarization that we see in our world today, and which can be amplified online, is preventing us from collaborating and solving some of our world's toughest problems, right? And as peace builders, we know that dialogue can really help to decrease that polarization. We know that it creates that sense of shared humanity, that it builds the empathy towards the other, and that it does help for that common ground to surface so that you feel like maybe I can actually collaborate with this person who I previously, excuse me, saw as the enemy. So today we have an exceptional panel who've been asking and working on this question. What can we achieve when we use technology and online tools to achieve those same outcomes that we know as peace builders dialogue can achieve? So without further ado, let me just start and get right into it, but keep that question in mind. What does it look like when we try and use dialogue online? And how do we know if it's working? And maybe what are some of the challenges of these people? So our first guest is Lisa Conn, making her inaugural trip after
facilitation, driving into the curb, so again, talking about the differences, and offering respect through listening. So those are our cornerstones of facilitation. Now the big question is, what am I doing here on this panel with you all? So for all 20 years, we've been designing and implementing all our dialogue and training using technology. So we're here because our founders did in fact design for health. So I'll just quickly show you, that's what we created. This is the 2017 iteration, not the 2002. But so essentially we were very, very early adopters of video conferencing. That's what it boils down to. And we built a platform that was built on our values and principles. It was built for access and equity. We were trying to bring together people who otherwise cannot get on planes and come together. We were trying to ensure safety. We were trying to promote our values of listening and belonging. So I'm happy to talk to anyone about the features, the affordances, etc. of the platform afterwards. If we just quickly go through. One big hallmark of what we do is measure. We got picked up by a couple of cognitive neuroscientists about 3-4 years into our life, and they've been helping us year on year to figure out how to measure what we do. And these are some of the things that we have learned that our programming can do around building empathy and belonging and activation. So in terms of that, that's all our programming, and I know I'm done. I'm going to talk for 1 more minute, Lena, I promise. Sorry, Lucas. What we've learned is that sustained facilitated engagement does work, and it has a very long tail of impact. We've been doing assessment work of our work, and it does work. We do know that high-touch engagement like ours scales at a very different pace. So when you start using the word scale, everybody gets frightened because I talk about human facilitation. We have proof of concept, but it happens at a different pace. The people that we work with are often young people who are not blind to what technology is bringing us to these days. And so I'll skip to the final slide. I think that where we are now is this gap between intention and impact, the thing that we at Soliya questioned and re-questioned, is what we are all here to do now. We have to ensure that if we know that there's a gap happening between the intention of how these platforms were designed and their impact, that it's incumbent on us to change that. So that's it. You can finish with my slides. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and as an organization that has really done so much to evaluate, please seek out Waidehi to learn more about all of those methodologies that were used. So our last panelist is Lucas Welch. Okay. How much did you pay for that? So after 9/11, Soliya, with the intention, that Waidehi was just explaining, founded Soliya and kicked that off for several years before moving to the Attention and Democracy Initiative with the Aspen Institute, which sought to really understand, what is the interplay between the attention economy and healthy democracies. And about a year and a half ago, Lucas founded Slow Talk, and that's what he's going to talk about with us today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Lena. So I'll just talk briefly about Slow Talk, and then I'd like to make some more general comments. Slow Talk is a conversation platform, and we are a public benefit corporation. And our ultimate vision is we'd like to see guided small group discussions become a utility, something that can be easily deployed at scale on any topic, without any friction, very affordably, for whatever use case people want. Now, for this conversation, if you'd like to see our design, please go to our website, slowtalk.us. We have a demo. It gives you a sense for how it works. But I feel like for this conversation where so many of us are focused on how do we build something that can really have an impact on these issues, there's two things that I'd like to focus on. One is aspirin, and the second is oxytocin. And there's a good reason for this. First of all, one reason is that I generally get really annoyed if someone takes the thing I'm going to talk about and talks about it before me, and I promise there's no one in the audience right now who's saying, damn it, I was going to talk about aspirin and oxytocin. So you're welcome. And the reason I want to talk about these things is that there's an expression in the investor startup world that you want to be selling aspirin, not vitamins, right? And the rationale is that we should all probably take vitamins, but we don't. Right? We don't go out and buy vitamins. But when you get a headache, you go buy aspirin, right? And so the underlying message is we need to focus, if you want to build a viable business, on a pain that people want to solve and people are willing to pay money for. And I feel like too often we in the social sector, the Save the World sector, which I am a proud member of, don't think enough about what is the market pain we are going to solve. We focus a lot on vitamins and what people should do, and I think it's important that we start really paying attention to what people are going to pay money for. And because building robust technology that scales and that can actually reach a number of people takes a lot of resource, because people expect really good UX. People expect that it's going to work no matter what the load on the server is. People expect that it's going to comply with these laws. So we need to be talking about the business models, and not all business models are created equal. I think I really admire the work that Lisa and Tristan have done to really elevate the discourse and acknowledge that an ad-driven business model by its nature is going to exacerbate our nervous systems. It's just designed to get us engaged, right? And so that brings me to the second point, the oxytocin. We've probably all heard about dopamine, right? Dopamine is the thing that we're all addicted to at this point, because we're constantly getting stimulated by these things, and it's kind of like a sugar high, right? You get a little fix, it feels good in the moment, but then it leaves you feeling a bit empty, right? You don't have a genuine sense of connection. And I think it's important that we don't just accept that's the only way to be profitable and to make money in this space. And I think probably a common theme amongst all of us up here is there is another deep human need beyond superficial stimulation that we all share, and it's to belong. It's to feel a sense of connection to the people around us, and our family, our friends, our communities, our workplaces. And oxytocin is essentially a neurotransmitter, just like dopamine, that has a lot to do with how we bond and form social connection with other people. And so I think it's important that we look at ways we can create viable, large businesses that meet that need. And this is a moment. We have a moment where society, again, thanks in large part to the work of a lot of people in this room, we're beginning to recognize those externalities that Tristan talked about last night. Like, we are doing harm to teenagers, their sense of self-esteem, to societies, their sense of togetherness. And I think we need to be looking at how we can develop viable, scalable businesses that at least have a compatible revenue model. Maybe not totally mission aligned, but compatible, so that we can bring some of those features into the world. So that's my attempt at a contribution to this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I want to just use a couple minutes to ask one question to everybody. You know, in some ways, designing to serve the need is prompting the question, what does it take to get uptake on these? And there's all kinds of things that, you know, whether you're an NGO or you're a startup company, that you're asking yourself, you know, what will it take to scale this? What is that demand signal? Sometimes people might think it's evidence, proof of concept, research, right? Others might say, I'm trying to decrease the possibility of violence. I'm trying to advance my business goals. So I would just love to hear from each of you, you know, what do you think has helped you to gain uptake of these fascinating initiatives that each of you have put, and what are some of the barriers that you face? So let's just hear from each of you on that.
Our case is very bizarre, which is we started the company in 2018. As you all recall, something big happened in 2020 that prevented people from leaving their homes and made people very hungry for social connection. And so in our case, a global pandemic resulted in about 500,000 people using Gatheround in a variety of ways. Some used us for bachelor and bachelorette parties and baby showers and things like this. Pretty much every university used us, and as part of this, all of the sort of major, mostly tech companies, but a variety of other sectors also used us because they were so hungry for solutions. And so short of recreating a devastating global pandemic, I think that some of the things that worked for us in the early days, which go kind of counter to what you should normally do to build a business, is that we were sort of a neutral, market agnostic product when we first launched, and we were able to see the categories of community, and I'll refer to a company as a community. We were able to see what categories of communities used and loved the platform. And for us at the end of 2020, we did a lot of analysis, and the reason that we chose the workplace as our kind of primary home was for a lot of the things that Lucas was talking about, and because it turned out that was the place that had the highest net promoter score and the highest love for the product. So in our scenario, we have this container of usage, which is the workplace. And you might have 50 employees, or you might have 200,000 employees. And when you are invited by a head of HR or a head of learning and development or your manager or your CEO to an experience, you have exposure to a platform like this. And my hope is that, you know, even though the container or the environment is the workplace and the conversation you're having maybe is about well-being in the workplace, by being exposed, I believe that technology can create norms for interacting, and by being exposed to healthy, facilitated dialogue that requires you to share stories and to listen, you will be able to carry a lot of that over into other parts of your life, including perhaps the Thanksgiving dinner table where you're a crazy uncle, you know, we all know that character, is maybe spewing things that you have trouble reacting to. And maybe you will be able to take the skills that you learn through your Gatheround experiences and apply it in another environment. So we chose the workplace as our kind of home for that, for a lot of the reasons that Lucas was describing in part with your question.
So I'll divide my answer into two. First, there's the work I've done, which I presented here, and I think it's an issue of audiences. There was a lot of industrial demand. I mean, I'm here talking about it here, and I spoke about it in Build Up and other conferences around the world. That the academic community, the peace building community, is eager to hear about that. It is more difficult to implement it among some organizations. In my experience, I'm talking only about the Israeli-Palestinian peace building environment. Is the issue of technology seems a bit, even Facebook seems a bit scary. We don't know, we're not sure. The issue of security, a lot of participants are hesitant just to join in line, who is watching from the other side. So that's a very big barrier. And when I talk about scalability and my idea about using AI and translate my skills into chatbots, I've been talking a lot about it with data scientists who showed a lot of interest, but then, okay, where's the money? Or, I mean, we all know this is the main problem. I mean, there's a lot of more money, I mean, in data science, let's say with health or with communication or other industries, But okay, who will pay? Who's going to be the ones going to pay for that? Who is interested to have better dialogue online? I don't know. I still don't have the answer.
We're looking to see the Arik avatar to facilitate. I can see it.
So the uptake for us was slow to begin with, and then kind of word of mouth increased. We did a lot of work early on by bringing people in through partnerships in the higher education realm. So the people coming together in conversations were generally young people from institutions of learning. So that kind of, perpetuates itself a little bit. We've since branched out into an array of sectors, and so that growth is largely organic for us. And if you think about us being 20 years old, we're now in the world where students who went through the program as young people are now in workplaces or professors themselves, and they're sort of, taking up the programming. I would also say the environment contributes. I mean, what's happening in the world, because we're global, it feels very relevant everywhere you are, as well as the pandemic was, an interesting moment for us. So where to from here? Look, I think there's no diminishing the relevance. If anything, it's about increasing the exposure to various different audiences. The bottlenecks for us are very much around who pays, who wishes to see this change, who wishes to invest in this change. If I can't then tell you, I'm going to bring it back to you 100x in dollar form. I can bring it back to you 100x in impact, but who pays for that? So that would be my biggest question mark for us.
Yeah, so we too, Lisa articulated better than I could, frankly, why we have also settled on focusing on the workplace. And over time, the aspiration is that by focusing in an area where you can get significant revenue, we can drive our unit economics down to genuinely make it a utility so that it could ultimately be a resource used by city councils to grapple with what should we do, whether we put a stop sign or a stoplight at that intersection, right? So that's the vision, that's the dream. I think one thing to share that might be helpful is some of the areas we tried but failed. We originally were oriented towards higher education, in part a lot of our experience at Soliya, and we felt, frankly, and still feel that Slow Talk would be a great resource, particularly as a lot of education moves online. You want to have more small group discussions about content rather than these crazy MOOCs or where it's just content fed at you. But you got to acknowledge the dynamics in institutions for the incentives of who has the buying power, what are they incentivized for, and frankly, the professors aren't really, they don't have budgets. It's just sometimes these logistical, practical considerations are really important. And so I think no matter how good your idea is, you've got to bring it out into the market and start talking to potential buyers. I mean, I think the tricky thing for us is to recognize that there's a lot that's been learned from Silicon Valley. There's a lot about the standard playbook for lean innovation. And frankly, some of it needs to be thrown out. I do not want to worship at that altar. But there's also a lot of things that have been learned that we can't throw out and we have to integrate into our thinking. And that's one of them, to really put it in the market, learn from user feedback, and adjust.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. So this is the moment to talk with your neighbors at your table, write down things and put them up on the sticky green things on the sides of the wall. But please join me in thanking our panelists. Excellent insights. Wonderful.